Serious, what celebrity death hit you the hardest? Barney Fife Sklong said. Mr. Rogers. As a kid growing up in Pittsburgh, so many of my afternoons were spent exploring a new world with him. I had a friend in college that I talked to after Mr. Rogers had passed, and he had said that when he and his brother were sad they both watched a show because it felt like somebody loved them. Not me fault said. Douglas Adams, author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I was kind of a weird kid, had trouble connecting with people. Then I read Hitchhiker's Guide when I was 12-year-old and it was like a light switching on. The strange twisting logic, the absurdism, the silly cynical ridiculousness of it all. It felt like, for the first time, I had found a worldview and perspective I could relate to. Douglas Adams became this almost mythical figure to me, this strange, distant person I could finally connect with. I desperately wanted to meet him, to be his friend. Then I learned that, a year before I'd even started the books, he died. It honestly crushed me. It felt I'd lost my best friend. I mourned him, and mourned the imagined relationship I could have had with him. Looking back, it was obviously a parasocial relationship, and my fantasies about this 50-year-old British author becoming buddies with a 12-year-old kid living in the US were nonsense, but I still felt it acutely at the time. Kakasino said. He was super active on the Hitchhiker's Guide forum before he died. I'd write up some normal post in a thread talking about morning routines or whatever, and within 15 minutes, my idol responded with a paragraph criticizing my tea making, or giving me advice on what to major in, or chiming in on political events of the day, usually with his brand of dry, glib wit. He posted a few times mentioning how he wanted to improve his overall health, and for those who don't know, he had a heart attack at a gym. I remember feeling sad, thinking he would have the funniest possible take about the circumstances of his own death. Crafty Custard Cream said. It was also such an awful, insulting end for such a brilliant mind. His utter rage at what was happening to him, and there was nothing he could do about it, was so damn painful. He did some really emotional interviews on UK TV. One I really remember was one he did to raise awareness on Alzheimer's on C4 News, where you could tell he was just brought to tears at not being able to communicate how he used to. Then a year after he passed, there was a memorial show for him where Neil Gaiman started crying, saying he just wanted his friend back, and it broke me. I still haven't read The Shepherd's Crown, because then when I do there'll be no more Discworld books left to read. Neondino said. I went to see Neil Gaiman do a talk not long after he died. It was meant to be about, I don't know, whatever Neil was working on at the time. But he just said, you know, we all want to talk about Terry. Let's just do that, and spent the majority of the talk just recounting stories. He even asked the audience who had a copy of Good Omens on them, a fair few, and read some of his favorite passages Terry wrote. I'm not a huge Neil Gaiman fan, but that was one of the most generous gestures I've ever seen for a fan community. Frozen and Stone said. For what it's worth to you, I went to college and was close with his daughter. I didn't know she was related until I mentioned I had made a new friend freshman year to my parents, and naturally they recognized her last name. She's doing really well. Can't speak to how she deals with her past day in and day out, but she grew up to be a wonderful person, and I was lucky enough to go to her wedding and share in that moment in her life. Phil was an amazing man. Taken from us way too soon. Funk's Motor 69 said. Oh man, every time I think of Phil I think, fuck his fucking shitbag wife. Why couldn't she just take herself out? Why take Phil, too, ? And then I remember the Andy Dick story and get mad at him, again. Phil Hartman was so awesome. Edit, here's the story about Andy Dick, told by John Lovitz. It's not what I heard back when the incident happened, sorry for misleading. https://www.cbsnews.com/lovitz-speaks-out-on-dust-up-with-Andy-Dick/ I hate vampires said. I was 6 when Jim Henson died. I was in bed and could hear my mom and my grandpa watching TV in the living room. They were watching the news and it was announcing Jim Henson had died. My mom and grandpa started talking about how they were going to tell me the next day, and maybe they would take me to the beach for the day and tell me there. I laid in bed and cried until I fell asleep. Zorak's girlfriend said. I feel like if Bodain got the right help he could have had a happy life. Depression is a tricky disease and can be fatal. For some people, you can try all the different types of therapies and medications and work extremely hard, but it still takes you in the end. For some people there is no right help, at least not yet. There are promising studies being done with psychedelics and other types of drugs and with magnetic stimulation on parts of the brain to help with treatment-resistant depression, but it's a lifelong struggle for many of us who suffer with depression. We do our best to fight this disease, knowing that it might still kill us in the end. Think of it like cancer, or something similar. You can get all the possible treatments and try everything available to get rid of it, but for some people, it won't completely go away and it ends up killing you. Unfortunately, Anthony Bourdain was one of these people. Watch Out Mod said. I shared my story in my own comments, but just so people can know the magic that was this man. Robin Williams. I've told this story on other accounts, but I love telling it. As a kid I was one of 10 winners for a sweepstakes to be a pen pal with Robin for a year. I was stoked and I'm like 8 or 9 years old. My brother and sister told me it probably wasn't going to be him, just a publicist or intern. I didn't care. For months we sent so many letters of silliness. All his letters were long and he really loved talking about Zelda. She's a little older than me, and all the new projects he was working on. My family went to Disney that summer and I wrote a letter while in the car and I was determined to give it to Genie because I was convinced he was always playing him in the costume and wanted to hand deliver at least one. My brother and sister were again deterring me, but I wasn't breaking my gait. Well, of all coincidences in the world, Robin actually was there signing autographs. I was ecstatic. Literally jumping for joy as I'm in line. We get to him and I'm rambling like a motherfucker telling him how I was a winner and about the letter and yada yada. Watch Out Mod said. He just goes Kyle. With a massive grin and opens his coat and pulls out my letter from a month prior that was with a few others. Apparently he kept all our letters on him while on the road to help cheer himself up, which devastates me now thinking about what that meant. I almost fainted. I cannot express the amount of electric energy surging through me knowing Robin Williams actually wrote me, knew me, and I believe truly loved me and those other kids like we were his children. I'll never ever claim anybody was a bigger fan of his than Zelda. I respect her too much to say that. But I'm definitely his second biggest fan of all time. When he died I cried into my then wife's arms for a full hour. I felt I really lost a true friend that got me through so much growing up. A man that could get my siblings and I to shut up and just revel in his magic for hours at a time. I miss you, Robin. Every day. TCB37 said. Quick story. I was once on vacation and one of the craziest things I will ever be a part of happened. All in one room in a restaurant was sitting the following people with their families at different tables: Ludacris, Magic Johnson, James Gandolfini, and Robin Williams. My brothers and I, young kids at the time, were instantly freaking out because we grew up on the movie Flubber. My younger brother went up to Robin Williams and told him how much that movie meant to our family. At the end of his dinner, Mr. Williams came to our table to say goodbye. Well, it turned into a 20-minute comedy bit. He was doing impressions, telling stories, and poking fun at my dad, which we found hilarious. He could have stopped at appeasing my brother. He didn't. He gave me and my family a moment we will never forget. What a treasure. The BB55 said. Not exactly a celebrity but Satoru Iwata. I loved many Nintendo games during his era as CEO, and after his passing I was in awe at how much he did personally to save games that were in development hell, as well as him choosing to take personal responsibility for the losses Nintendo saw during the Wii U by cutting his paycheck rather than letting go of employees. Truly an exemplary man if ever I've seen one. Rosioff Theliquid said. Neil Peart. Both my dad and I are big Rush fans, so it was heartbreaking knowing that we are never going to see him play live again. Edit. I'm happy to see so many share the same feelings. Also, thank you kind strangers for the awards, they are my first ones and I'm happy it was this comment that got them. Witcher West 1998 said. When Chester Bennington passed I was in such disbelief. Linkin Park played a huge part in defining my music taste and I always loved Chester's singing and screaming. I can remember where I was when I got the news and everything. Pig20 said. Last time I saw him was when he was fronting for Stone Temple Pilots some years ago. It was at a music festival and I was actually really surprised at how well he did. He performed all of STP's hits and totally played into Wieland's stage persona. It was sad to see him go. and it makes me wonder if Chris Cornell's passing maybe pushed Chester over the edge. Supposedly, they had become very close in recent years before they passed. I think Chester even spoke at Cornell's funeral. Flatigal said, "He's in a wonderful silly movie called Pirate Radio, and his character says, you know, a few months ago, I made a terrible mistake. I realized something, and instead of crushing the thought the moment it came I let it hang on, and now I know it to be true. And I'm afraid it's stuck in my head forever. These are the best days of our lives. It's a terrible thing to know, but I know it." I watched the movie after he passed and damn near burst into tears. Zoe said. Chris Cornell grew up with Soundgarden and Temple of the Dog. The first Audioslave album came out when I was in high school. Epic sound, seemed like a great guy. I thought he was going to survive the grunge curse. The only one left from that era now is Eddie Vedder. PMMEQ Tutor said, "I met him once at a tiny anime con, and while I knew his face and knew that I should know his name, I couldn't place it. We chatted about Halo for a bit over an hour because he seemed super into it. Maybe he wanted a break from all the Mythbusters talk? IDK, but he was super nice." Uncirculated said, Christina Grimmie. "I used to follow her YouTube channel very early on, long before she became famous, and I was so excited that she made it on The Voice. Then one random day a crazy fan shot and killed her. Celebrity deaths don't really get to me, but hers hit me hard for a while. She had a very bright future ahead of her, and it was all taken away in seconds." Am I but choking said, "I was in utter shock when a random article popped up with the news. She was my secret guilty pleasure, with an irreplaceable voice. Her brother intervened immediately and prevented the tragedy to progress further." Edit. Police said Marcus Grimmie immediately tackled the man, later identified as Kevin James Loibl, 27, of St. Petersburg, Florida, after he opened fire, possibly saving the lives of countless others. At a news conference today, Orlando Police Department Chief John Mina said Marcus Grimmie's actions were heroic. The gunman fatally shot himself during the struggle with Marcus Grimmie and was pronounced dead at the scene, police said. Her brother is a hero. Source, https://obscennews.go.com/entertainment/Marcus-Grimmie-brother-hail-story-question mark IDEC was 397844180. Klaus Wolfwood said, "I think Alex Trebek and Steve Irwin are the only two I've ever teared up over. I have a lot of good memories growing up of watching Jeopardy! With my mom, and it felt like a little piece of me was lost when I heard of his passing. I was just a kid when Steve Irwin died, but I still remember my mom sitting me down and explaining to me what had happened, as if he were a member of the family. He instilled a love of animals in me that I still have to this day, and I'm eternally grateful to him for how he treated the creatures he interacted with. Seeing Robert follow in his footsteps also makes me feel proud in some strange way." Kent Walkmain said, "I consider myself very fortunate for having seen Mitch live twice. The last time I was at a show with my ex-wife and there was a heckler who really fucked with Mitch's rhythm. We were sitting up front and could see how he was having a hard time getting back on track. He was just stuttering trying to think of what was next, and my wife asked him if he likes wearing turtlenecks and he smiled and ran with the joke and got right back on track. Normally we wouldn't dream of speaking during a set, but this one time it was cool to be able to get him back on track and witness his genius." Good Lord Chokanabom said, "He died a couple of weeks before I started university. At the freshers' ball, the band stopped playing and asked us to respect a minute's silence for Steve. 1,000+ teenagers, away from home for the first time, and not one said the word, until the minute was over and a spontaneous Steve? 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 Chant broke out. I don't know if any other celebrity could have commanded that much universal respect." Gooblob said, "This dog. For years randomly this guy's guitar videos show up in my recommended on YouTube, and in a lot of them the dog is just chilling there. Well, this week, he posted this video announcing the dog had died, and I cried. I usually am like, oh no, when a famous person dies, but it doesn't really impact me. But this dog, man, it got to me." Seymour Hinney said, "Mac Miller is someone I grew up with, Truly, during high school he was releasing party music and probably his poppiest music, so I didn't really enjoy his music as much, but did hear his stuff he did watching movies in 2013 when I graduated, and I was all in. Truly someone with incredible artistry, and what is a crazy cosmic coincidence, had a lot of music that comforted me and related a lot to my life. He did phases when I was getting into more serious drug use. He was sobering up when I moved to a new city and was basically clean. He released Divine Feminine when I was falling in love, and Swimming whenever I was still recovering from the breakup. I was absolutely crushed when he died. It felt like losing a distant friend. I still have a hard time listening to his music. Daria, 42, said she wanted to go to rehab at one point and her father actively convinced her not to because they'd lose out on profits and fame, and she was fine. That was the beginning of her downward spiral that ultimately led to her death. So many assholes around her, especially her family, who did nothing but abuse her talent. The woe is me whining her parents did after her death makes me want to puke. You were a main cause of her suffering. Winterjet Sama Milk said that one fucked me up. Hybrid Theory was the first album I bought where I honestly, thoroughly enjoyed every track. I was 15, and that whole album was a roller coaster of emotions for me. From highs to lows, each song points to a specific memory in my mind. Never really cared for any other of their other albums, but the way he went out just flipped my view of life. Some people who appear to have a lot can be missing something big, which might seem insignificant to those who appear to have little. And vice versa. Flamin' Cheetos 99 said, "Oh man, I was thinking about him just a couple hours ago. I can confidently say the LP has been a part of my life, basically since birth. My brothers listened to the band non-stop. They were the goats for introing me to the genre in general. As I grew up, I became progressively more attached to the group and their separate projects as well. Stone Temple Pilots, Dead by Sunrise, Fort Minor. One of my dreams was to see the band perform live, which unfortunately never ended up happening. I still remember exactly where I was and how I found out when Chester passed. Down to the gut-sinking feeling I had as I realized that that was it. Linkin Park as we knew it would never exist again. It was one of those moments where reality strikes in you because aware of how fragile our mortality is." The Count Live said, "It's not you. He didn't talk about it with anyone. He did Five Bloods with Spike Lee and Ma Rainey just before he died, and none of those directors, cast, etc. had a clue. One of the actors on Five Blood said he noticed he has a masseuse give him rub-downs during downtime and thought he'd just gone Hollywood. He regretted thinking that, but how could he know? He didn't even tell Disney, and they had been prepping for BP2, had to start from scratch.